Okay, here we have part 2 of our perfection knot video instruction for the knots and rigging section of our Downy Fly Fisher newsletter. In part 1, we tied our standard perfection loop. Here it is. And the main purpose of that was so that we can loop-to-loop connect our leader to a loop in the end of our fly line. Okay, now in part 2 what we're going to try to do is tie this knot, but we're going to have our fly attached here. It'll be actually right in the loop here, and there's a lot of benefits for having a loop knot attached to a swimming fly such as a clouser minnow, and we'll go over a few of those advantages at the end of the video. Okay, so the knot is basically going to be the same as it was in part 1, but now you have to work this fly with your tag end, and that's really the only difference. So let's go ahead and get started. What we're going to do is thread the tippet through the eye of the hook, and now your tag end is basically going to have this fly on it, and that's really the only difference. You can see right now this fly is sliding freely, and just as we did in part 1, we're going to take our tag end, but now there's a fly here. So put your fly right in your hand like that, and you're going to make a loop just like you did in part 1. Okay, so there's our loop. Now you're going to notice my loop's a little bit bigger, and I'll explain why that is in a second. You'll see why that is. Okay, so it looks just like it did in part 1. There's our loop. We passed it, remember, the tag end behind the standing part of our tippet here. Okay, and now the only difference is that we have a fly on this tag end, and you can see right now this fly is no part of the knot. I could take it off and it looks just like it did in part 1. Okay, so I'll just go ahead and put that right back on there, so our fly is just still swinging freely. Okay, now it does become part of the knot here in the next step. Alright, so let's go ahead for step 2. Here's our loop, and there is our fly. Okay, and our tag end. So now we're going to make our second loop just like we did in part 1, passing it right around to the back side and once again pinching it. Now the difference is that my fly is now on that second loop. Okay, so there's the fly right on that second loop, and there's my tag end just like it was in the first part of the knot. Okay, so we have loop 1, we have loop 2 right here, and loop 2 has the fly on it, and then we have our tag end. Okay, and I just usually like to set my fly right on my thumb like that. It usually sits nicely there, and instead of having it swing all over the place. Okay, and then just like in part 1, we take our tag end to finish the knot off, and we pass it between loop 1 and loop 2. Okay, so pass it right between and pinch, and make sure you pinch it down there. Okay, now just like if you remember in part 1, we reached through this and grabbed that loop. We do the same thing, but now we have to pass that fly through it. And that's why I kept loop 1 a little bit bigger here. Okay, so you can reach through the back and grab it if you're comfortable doing that. Or if you like, you can just go ahead and pass that fly, which is on loop 2, right through our first loop. Okay, now what we need to do is we hold on to our fly and hold on to your tag end. Don't pull it, but hold on to it, and then pull the standing part of your line, and you're going to see that's going to snug up there. Now if you practice this on your couch like you should before you go out and fish, you'll see that you can make your loop all different sizes here. You can make a big loop, you can make a small loop, and people have different preferences. I personally most of the time like a smaller loop, so I'm going to manipulate that and get my loop small. Now remember, just like in part 1, you don't pull on the tag end here. You don't pull on that for this knot. You pull on the loop, which our fly is attached to now, and the standing part of our line. So you go ahead and get it snug, kind of like that. That's going to make a nice loop, or at least the size that I like. And then you moisten before you pull tight. So moisten that knot up. Now I pull my fly and the standing part of my line, and you're going to see just like in part 1 of the video there, we have a nice 90-degree angle with our tag end, which lets us know right away that this knot is tied correctly. Okay, we go ahead and clip. I like to clip it fairly close, just because of the areas that we fish here in Southern California and the bays and the estuaries and in the surf. There's lots of kelp and different forms of eelgrass and whatnot, and if you leave a big tag on there, it's going to catch on a lot of that weed. So I tend to clip it pretty close. Okay. Now the benefits of having this loop knot on here are the perfection loop is the only loop that sits perfectly straight like that, and that's why it's called the perfection loop. There's no kink or cock in it. It doesn't cock one way or the other. It's just a perfectly straight loop. And the benefits of this are it's going to allow your clouser minnow to swim a little bit more freely in the water, which is always nice. More action is going to usually induce more strikes. And also it's going to allow this fly to sink quicker because it's going to hit the water and it's not bound here to the line. So it's going to sink down nice and quick, getting you on the bottom or down deeper, usually where you want to fly, like the clouser minnow. And that is the perfection loop with a fly on the end of it.